Oh, there we are. Thank you, Jen. So friends who are here in the sanctuary, here's what I'm going to tell you. I took a COVID test on Thursday, got my results back on Friday. They were negative. So I'm going to stand a further distance away from you. And if it's all right with you guys, I'm going to pull my mask off. If I get any closer to you, I'll put my mask on. Please don't worry. We don't normally endorse this, but we're trying out this procedure where if I could get a test in the previous 48 hours or so, it makes me feel a lot better, and hopefully it brings us some sense of comfort since we have more room in the sanctuary this morning. So we started today with a story about St. Francis. I'm going to tell you another story. This also takes place in a faraway land, a land not of pizza, but of cattle in my great home country of Texas. So my family grew up on a cattle ranch in West Texas. And the reason that we have anything that we have financially is because of the meat industry. And the meat industry, of course, has so many ethical issues. And there's a difference between the cattle ranch that we grew up on and the industrial feedlot that moved in up the way, whose dust full of everything you could imagine would blow onto our land. It's awful. So I'm not a fan of the agro-industrial complex that produces those awful conditions. And when I was in high school, I practiced a religious practice during the Christian season of Lent, where you give up something, part of your deepening spirituality. And one year I decided I'm going to be vegetarian. Feels like something that's a good thing to do. I'd like to try it. You're supposed to do it for 40 days. Previously, I had given up chocolate and caffeine, and I felt so good after 40 days that I stopped doing it for a year. I'd given up different kinds of sugars. I'd given up soft drinks. When I was in 8th grade, I've not had a soft drink since I was in 8th grade. I'm pretty good at Lent. So I thought, okay, this might really be a big change. But I found after a week being vegetarian, not only was it so hard, I was also really having questions because of my connections, my family connections to the land. And it's really hard to be a vegetarian in West Texas. We didn't have all the Beyond Meats and different plant-based things that we have now. I could do it now. It was really hard. Same time, my friend Paul went on a field trip with his school, and they went to a meat packing complex that are all over West Texas. It's a huge source of employment, both for pork and for cattle. Not that they're employed, there's employment for people. They process pork and cattle there. Paul went in, being a boy from West Texas, eating hamburgers and tacos and all those kinds of things, came out a vegetarian. And every time I see him, we have the same running joke. Shake his hand, I give him a hug. I say, still vegetarian? He says, yes, 20 years later. The Reverend Catherine Shivers gave a sermon on eco-theology, a spirituality that combines our humanity with our non-human animal siblings and with the earth. She relates to this story of being a student at the UU seminary in Chicago, Meadville, Lombard, where in the dorms there was a sign over the sink that says, "You are responsible for your own theology, ... and your own dishes." We take this further to say that we're responsible for our own theology and Unitarian Universalism, for discovering what is most meaningful for us and sharing that and exercising that and being good examples. We're responsible for our own dishes, both literal and metaphorical, for cleaning up after ourselves. But in a world that begs for someone to be a good steward, to follow in the example of St. Francis, that we are also responsible for our own food choices, as being part of this interdependent web of all existence we talk about in our 7th principle. It's part of the circle of life that we heard about earlier today. So she offers small steps that anyone can take. So if you were like me, whenever I think about my failed experiment with vegetarianism back in the early 2000s, when I listen to podcasts, go to the PETA website, it's really easy to be overcome with guilt and with the bigness of the problem. It's so easy to fall into just despair. Whenever I feel that, I try to follow the example of St. Francis, whose prayer has come down to us, most notably in English in this translation, a prayer that starts out, "Make me an instrument of peace." The question I try to ask when I feel this guilt or shame or despair, so what can I do today to be an instrument of peace? And whatever way that looks, if that's coming to our Black Lives Matter vigil on Thursdays, if that's marching for women's rights on Saturdays, if it's making one choice when I'm at the grocery store, that's what I try to do. What can I do today to be an instrument of peace? So I'm not asking everyone here to become vegetarian. I'm not asking you to change anything about your life except one thing. Try one thing. So for us, for me and KP and our family, it's been trying to eat meat a little bit less. Maybe having one vegetarian meal per week. Maybe having 2 vegetarian meals. Other advice we've received is to get to know a farmer. Some of my friends back in DC are urban farmers who grow crops on the tops of skyscrapers, providing food in the middle of what some consider food deserts, providing green growing things to local restaurants, to farmers markets, to the people. The owner of an all organic farm back home says, I get it. You go to Whole Foods, some people call it whole paycheck because you spend a lot of money there. He says, maybe buying one thing that's organic that you wouldn't have otherwise. Not the whole thing, but maybe one thing. Because every choice that we as individuals make helps change the larger system. And while we can't do it on our own as individuals, we can make individual choices that help us feel like instruments of peace. Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote a book on emergent strategy, one of her principles is that small is good and small is all. The idea that nature teaches us that on a very small scale, actions can be replicated and replicated and replicated to make bigger reactions. And that we can't hope to make big changes in the world to heal broken systems if we can't practice those things in our own lives. By getting in touch with nature, being a good steward, listening to the bugs and the animals, planting a tree perhaps, planting 3 flowers, donating to organic farms or farmers markets. There are many small things we can do in our lives. We've had the option, we've had the offering of when we have potlucks here. And before times we would have potlucks on the second Sunday. We've had the offering to have an all vegan or all vegetarian potluck someday. These are all things that we could try out. The idea here is to rather than see justice for the earth, calls for plant-based diets or vegetarianism, rather than feeling the guilt as I often feel. To think about instead, what is the difference I can make today? Make me an instrument of peace. With so many things in our broken systems, a culture of white supremacy wants you to feel shame and guilt so that you do not change anything about it. It is a self-protecting mechanism of the culture. So learning to let our guilt go, learning to express it and share it amongst each other and our joys and concerns, learning to pray it out, learning to think about not instead of, how can I not feel this guilt? How can I not get in trouble? Reframing it to, how can I make a difference? How can I be an instrument of peace? Just saying from one of my favorite book stories, that one raindrop raises the sea. And that sea imagery of the water holding the baby seal from our music this morning. May we add our raindrops to the sea that holds all of life, that cradles it, that makes us instruments of peace and of love. Let's think about our one thing today. And may it build and build and build. Because of love's great drive. May we follow in the footsteps of St. Francis. May it be so. Amen. This is the fun part. We are about to have a blessing of the animals.